Okay, welcome everybody to ExUnboxing by Index Hazardous Area Professionals. We are presenting today R.Stahl ExPressure. I am the General Manager of Index, and our presenter is Gergely Jambrick from R.Stahl, Business Development Manager. Gergely, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Good morning, good day, good evening from my side as well. As Michael said, my name is Gergely Jambrick. I am Business Development Manager by R.Stahl, and I will lead you through our presentation today with Index ExUnBox for R.Stahl ExPressure. And I think we can just start.
Okay. So, R.Stahl ExPressure, as you gentlemen say, challenging standards. So Gergely, I shall turn it over to you right now. If you have any questions, we shall ask, or if anybody from the group that is attending.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. During the Index webinar, I think it was number 6, Michael has presented some future technologies, and during this presentation, he also presented us ExPressure as a possible future technology, which is actually existing by R.Stahl. And after this webinar, there were some questions about the technology, how it functions, where can it be installed, where not, how to use it, what is EXS at all. And that's why we have cooperated now with Index for this 2-day webinar to show you a little bit more from ExPressure and explain some stuff how this technology functions. Everybody knows, I think from all of you know the basic principle of EXD, so that the explosion cannot escape to the outside, so that it is able to ignite the outer EX atmosphere. Normally, we use a thick-walled and pressure-resistant enclosure in hazardous area. And if an explosive gas mixture is ignited, the pressure of the explosion is safety and encapsulated by the enclosure, by EXD. In addition, of course, there we have the flame-proof joint. Yeah, it depends on the gas group, which also was explained during the webinars, which ensure that the gas cools down and the ignition cannot flash over to the surrounding atmosphere. And during in the past, we have asked ourselves the following: what if we didn't have to keep the explosion pressure inside the enclosure, but simply release it? And what if we could release it to the surrounding environment and at the same time guarantee the same high level of safety? And what if the temperature created during the explosion meet the safety criteria in hazardous areas? And our answer to and the solution to all these questions is the first explosion-proof enclosure which safely releases heat and energy. And this is what ExPressure does from R.Stahl. And this is open. So, this opens. Yes.
So traditionally, for traditional EXD, we're looking at a box that is going to absorb the heat out of the explosion, contain the arcs and sparks within the enclosure. Now, what you're saying R.Stahl has done is come up with another method that could perhaps be better than a standard EXD box. So I'm going to go to the next slide just to show people really quickly what we're looking at when we're dealing with EXD. So gas is not kept out of the enclosure, even R.Stahl's ExPressure. That explosion's happening inside, and it's released from the flame path, even through the threads of the bolts.
Yes, correct.
If everything's properly installed, it is safe. So all
if all the bolts are
heat-
tightened according to the IOMs, and if every EXD points are considered and observed.
Yes. So a traditional box with an explosion, the explosion is to happen inside, and the flames, the heat, and the arcs and sparks do not travel to the outside. So that's a typical EXD box. Now, what we're looking at, if you want to explain this, Gergely, what Stahl, the idea?
Mm-hmm. The idea is that we have the heart of the ExPressure is, as you can see on the right picture, is the multi-layer stainless steel wire mesh. This mesh is made of stainless steel, and they are welded to the enclosure side. You can find them on the left and the right side of the enclosure. And this divert the it's several layers above each other welded to the enclosure. And this is the part of the enclosure. This is certified together with the enclosure. This is the EXS
Portion of the enclosure.
Portion of the type of protection EXS. This is the type of protection, and the gas flow through this mesh, if there is an ignition inside of the enclosure, and divert the explosion pressure safely to the outside. And the gas flow and the heat absorption are thus through or via this mesh is controlled.
So would you say there's...
Yeah.
Sorry about that. So there is also still the traditional flame paths, and where would you find those?
The traditional flame path are on the cover, yeah, and on the bottom side of the enclosure, where all the cable entries or the conductor bushings going through either through the XE connection chamber or in case of direct entry through the barrier glands. And these two sides, the cover and the bottom side of the enclosure, are regarding to the EXD type of protection.
Okay.
But the sides, the top, and of the enclosure are EXS, and this is combined together in one cabinet.
Mankind has always questioned the status quo. Is there anything more powerful than a horse? Can we exceed the speed of sound? Do we need heat to make light? Can a car be smarter than its driver? Today, R.Stahl is about to question the status quo once more. Is the smartest solution to explosion protection really to keep explosive pressure inside the box? Introducing ExPressure by R.Stahl, the world's first flame-proof box that safely releases potential ignition energy. Rather than containing explosions through solid construction, ExPressure safely releases energy. When an ignition occurs, its heat and pressure are passed through a complex mesh structure that allows them to bleed off energy. This makes ExPressure 50% lighter than other flame-proof boxes, while offering the same reliable safety. Simply by turning the energy of an explosion into a harmless gust of warm air. ExPressure by R.Stahl, challenging standards.
Last video, that the gases are released through the traditional flame path, but also through this mesh. This is the EXS, correct?
Yes, this is the EXS. Yeah.
Okay.
What you can see on the picture in open status, this is the explosion vent. The we will talk about later on, but the basics explosion protection of ExPressure based on the EXS is the mesh.
Okay, let's go to the next.
So
Really,
and this
do you want to tell us what
technology,
the advantages.
excuse me?
If you wanted to tell, what are the main advantages, would you say, of the R.Stahl ExPressure?
Through the mesh and through the much less overpressure in the enclosure, one of the advantages is that you need a significantly lower wall thickness. We're talking about here about from 2 millimeters. And this opens the possibility that the enclosure can be much lighter than a conventional EXD enclosure. This is one of this makes it. Excuse me.
Specifically from that, so the wall thicknesses would be much less because it's actually populated on the left and right hand side by the mesh. Yes. instead of a traditional EXD wall.
Yes. As I told, the cover and we added the wall thickness of the cover and of the bottom side of the enclosure, because we are still using the protection of EXD are based on the requirements from the standard, from the -1, the minimum wall thicknesses and flame pads on the cover and on the bottom side of the enclosures. Okay. And because we can use a wall thickness of only 2 millimeters, this makes it extremely lightweight and very spacious for an XD solution. That means we have thin walls, lightweight enclosure. We have no additional wall mounting frame in the conventional meaning, and you can have only one large cabinet inside instead of a combination of several EXD enclosure. That means also less footprints. It can be up to 45% less footprints, and it saves space. This makes the machinery and the system design more compact. And this is especially important if you have, for example, tightly packed installation like a brownfield application where you have existing space for installation, or top sides. And for example, if the customer has to adding more automation or more energy consumers on the same footprint, and it's a good option in confined space like on oil rigs or in escape routes as well.
So we have a question from somebody asking, does it meet the overpressure requirements of 60079-1, or are there some special considerations? So we will touch on these in the next few slides, but it does meet the pressure requirements of EXD. EXS, there is individual requirements, which it also does meet, correct? If I'm saying that right?
Yes, that's correct.
There you go.
ExPressure is all in all in a one high quality premium solution. It's one large cabinet, no combination of enclosures needed, no joints and interfaces, mechanical or electric, like in XD enclosure combinations. You can have a better integration of designs and construction from an industrial cabinet. And this is if you have a predefined kit or pre-assembled kits, could be easily integrated, because we have more or less the biggest enclosure is more or less the size of a normal industrial cabinet. So if the customer has an industrial application, we can simply integrate it into our enclosure. That means you have high flexibility for the replacement. And you have reduced planning time, you have reduced run time, and this kind of cabinet is you have saving in logistic or commissioning, and you have less cable lengths, because you can install an industrial application into the enclosure and thus directly at the machine, for example.
Now, if I may jump in and ask a question. So
yeah,
with this application, ExPressure, it's available for nearly worldwide use, onshore, offshore. What are the, as these points here, just wanted to have you talk about them. So it being IECX, ATEX, thus it can go nearly everywhere. Just wanted you to explain each of these.
The enclosure is ATEX and IECX certified. Yeah, those applicable in the most country in the world. It depends also on the plant or what the customer requirements are. Yeah, the empty enclosure has also an NEC certificate, NECC certificate through QPS. You can find it on our website, and thus we can have the possibility to offer a solution under our panel shop program for NEC and CUC. We have a wide temperature range from low to high, from -40 degrees to +60 degrees. Yeah, of course, it depends on all other components which build and installed inside. And you can use from indoor to high corrosive offshore atmosphere, including H2S. Yeah, this is because of the cabinet itself. It's stainless steel, SS318, and this is a high corrosive resistant stainless steel. We have also a large or long design life. We can say minimum 30 years. Of course, it always depends on the environment, on the application, on the installed components, and so on. This is more or less what we have to discuss in the case of this single application we have on our workload. The enclosure itself can withstand more than 30 internal explosions. This is also one of the big advantages that after an explosion, you simply just replace the explosion vents on the sides of the ExPressure, and you see if there was an explosion in the enclosure because the explosion vents are open, and there is really a sign of that. And we have also the possibility to give you a solution electrical, that you have a signal if there is if the explosion vent has been opened.
Okay, so
and
we
because
just had a few questions to people wondering what standards this complies with. So again, it complies with EXD 60079-1 and EXS, which is 60079-33. So as to what the primary standard is, they're both. This is an EXD SB. Yeah. Now, people are asking for what the advantages of this over EXP are. That's going to be in the next few slides. Gergely, would you be fine if we move to the next slide? That'll answer the question.
Yes, just one more point. What also I see the last point: the switch gears will not be destroyed. Yeah, because we have a low overpressure inside of the enclosure. Your switch gear will not be destroyed. That's also a point we have to mention at this stage, because it's so simple. Of course, you have to make an FAT again and check the components inside. If they are manually, electrically are still in the good shape and the characteristic has not changed of the protection. But after explosion, we can say you can switch on again.
So with a typical EXD cabinet, if there is an explosion inside, you have to individually review each component inside, because sensitive equipment now may have become damaged and is no longer safe to use. It would increase the overall temperature if something was shorted out, something to the likes of that. So the advantage is that the overall internal pressure, so the pressure piling, is severely reduced through the use of this mesh escape path for an overpressure.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, let's go to the next slide for people. So this is just a quick one from Stahl's data sheet. Just wanted to show that, as Gergely said, that there's up to a 40 or 50% weight reduction, and I think you said a 25 to 40% footprint reduction. Now this is only for
yes,
2B.
it depends. It depends on the application.
Yeah, and it's only 2B gas groups, at the 2A and 2B at this time, and correct?
Yes, it's 2B and 2A at this time, but we are working on 2B plus H2.
Okay.
It will come in the near. It will follow in the near future, I think.
And as mentioned, there was the option of the EXE connection chamber to remove the need for EXD barrier glands. Also inspection windows, which is great for inspections, especially close inspections. And then also the hinge that make sure that during maintenance that the door, less chance of it getting damaged, nobody dropping it on the ground. So I'll go to the next slide.
Yes.
So I'll go through this one. So gentlemen, EXS, you're wondering what EXS is. So EXS is for equipment with an EPL, equipment protection level, that is designed, assessed, and tested for parts of equipment with a recognized type of protection or a combination of different protection techniques because of functional or operational limits where the designed equipment protection level can be achieved by the use of this standard. Now what they're saying, so where the equipment that cannot be fully assessed. So this design deviates from the typical EXD installation. So EXS standard was created to allow for flexibility. This standard has been around for, I believe, over 15 years. It's very well known. And Stahl has put in, how many years, how much time and manpower would you guys say you put into the design of this? Like how many tests have you gentlemen done on this, Gergely? Gergely? Can you hear me?
I hear you. Yes.
So when you guys did the designing and testing of Stahl ExPressure, like when was it first released, and how in depth, how much testing did you guys do?
You mean released for sale, or?
Yes. Which date was it released, and also how much time did you guys put into the design and the testing to ensure safety?
But it was a long period of development of the enclosure, and we released ExPressure 2 years ago on the market.
And so it's covered by the IECX certification and also ATEX. So it has been approved and it is well trusted. Both these standards, which cover it, 60079-1 and -33, are approved by EN and IEC.
Yes, this is the method of EXS is verified due to 2 independent verifier, as it also says in the standard, and they are the member of the test laboratory and the certification body at PTB and DECRA. You can find it also in the certificate.
And specifically, EXS has been made so that it allows for these unique innovations. So because the design contains innovative explosion protection on the left and right hand side with the metallic mesh and the pressure reliefs to release pressure and reduce the overall explosion inside in the event of an internal ignition. Now, 60079-1 EXD does not cover the explosion reliefs, the vents. Those are covered under -33. And -33 is to be consulted when all existing options have been exhausted and the EXD designers have to come up with new dimensions or a new protection method. So Stahl came up with ExPressure. So the idea to be able to use this safely was it's developed with 60079-33 defined. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So, Gergely, if you wanted to explain that mesh to people, to explain the -33, the EXS that they're unsure
of. This is as the mesh is the heart of the ExPressure, and they are flow channels in a multi-layer stainless steel wire mesh system, and they are made of stainless steel SS316, and which are welded to the enclosure. And as I told before, these mesh is divert the explosion pressure safely to the outside, and the maximum internal pressure in an ExPressure enclosure will be less than 1 bar, and the internal pressure increase after explosion is significantly lower than in the conventional EXD enclosure, as I told. And this is what allows us to use lower wall thickness. And the ruptured disc, what you see on the picture, protects the mesh and signalize if there is an explosion has happened. And the external surface of the ExPressure relief or the explosion vent maintain the IP rating of the enclosure. So it's also a protection of the mesh itself, also from dirt and dust, for example. Yeah? In the event of a blowout through the ruptured disc, or in case of a damaged or deformed ruptured disc, they have to be replaced by identical new ruptured discs, which can be ordered as an accessory from R.Stahl. Yeah. And this what is really important for maintenance and inspection methods, the permeability, I think it's the right word, of the pressure relief or the mesh is important for the integrity of the special protection. That means everything which can lower this permeability, like corrosion, excessive moistening, painting, it cannot be painted or coated. Dust layers has to be prevented on the internal and the external surface of the mesh.
So somebody just asked, what was the difference between EXD and S enclosure? Now, this enclosure, there is no EXS enclosure here. The overall protection technique, the flame path up here, and where the cable glands are down here, this is the EXD. It's a typical EXD box, but on the left and right hand side is where the pressure relief are. That's the EXS component. So your D is your typical walls, the typical flame paths, the flanged flame path, where your cable gland entries are. The EXS is the mesh. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Let's go to the next slide.
Because there is no installation standard. Which standard you follow? Do you follow for cable glands or actuators or inspection windows on the surface? That's why we said on the cover and the bottom side for the cable entries will still remain in the frame of XD standard -1.
So an important consideration, so people don't get confused, is this mesh, yeah, this pressure relief point is not a breather or a drain device. A breather drain will go on the bottom of the enclosure. That still may be required, yes, depending on the end user. Now this ExPressure, this cannot be blocked. So it's just, think of a typical EXD box, you have to have the clearance for it to operate correctly. It's letting pressure out, and those hinged sidewalls that open and close have to have clearance. And so to prevent blocking of that, an explosion vent will be mounted on top, or on the sides, we should say. Somebody asks, rupture disc seems thin. Can they handle mechanical hazards such as 7 joules impact protection, as IP rating depends on them? Now, I believe, Gergely, this enclosure is rated IP66, so it has had also impact testing on it, correct?
Yes, yes.
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
it has more than 7 joule because it's another type of protection.
And it's stainless steel, so it is very robust.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So these are typical dimensions, and your biggest one is size 62, I believe?
Yes, it's the biggest one at the moment.
So we're looking at,
and of course,
at about 1066 millimeters by 1466. And
yeah.
So
everything else on the cover and the bottom side of the enclosure remains the same. You can still use the same proven actuators, inspection windows, as with all our XD solutions, like actuating element, indicating lamps, cable glands, and the bottom. It also can be equipped with XE connection chambers, cover hinges, actuators, rotary drives, signal lamps, and the standards and rules remain the same for the cable entries and also for the actuators according to -1 and -14. This is
and if it's an EXE connection chamber, then the cable gland has to meet -7, -14. So then the use of EXE cable glands are available.
Yes, and in the case of an XE connection chamber, the interface between the XD and the XE side is made through conductor bushing, so-called conductor bushings, which can be screw-in and plug-in types up to 1000 volts, and we have also some bolt type conductor bushings, which can be used up to 240 square millimeters.
So another way to say that, people, is these could be called line bushings, conductor bushings. These are what allow the use of joining an EXD and EXE enclosures together, which maintains the barrier between them. So this is the specific component that must be used.
Yes. Yes, this is what we use generally in the case of an XD and XE combination.
Okay, so people were asking about the advantages of Stahl ExPressure over, let's say, a typical EXP or a non-EX installation or EXD. Gergely, if you wanted to state the differences.
This is how we code our small pre-qualification sheet, what we use together with our customers, or we can or give as an advice, to combine the advantage of ExPressure against the previous solutions like non-EX or XP or XD. Yeah. As I told, by non-EX, you have one installation directly at the machine. That means you have shorter cable lengths. You don't need to come from the safety area into the EX area with many hundred meters of cable length. You have more space in the control room because you have one cabinet, one enclosure, and it can be useful in the case of an like a brownfield installation. You have faster commissioning because you need less personnel for setup and installation, and this also reduce your logistic time and installation time. You have more compact installation and more functionality, and you have to you must open or close only one enclosure. You have shorter downtime, loss of production, and a better overview, for example, during the maintenance. Yeah, it reduces time for the failure search because you don't have to open a combination of several XT enclosures and search for the failures. You have to open only one. Yeah, you don't need against 2 XP solutions. You have a lower weight. Yeah, there is no waiting time before startup. There is no need for purgings. It's also reduced time times because you don't need to inspect and maintenance the flow pressure or the air pressure, on the site. Yeah, against the conventional XT solutions, as I mentioned, you have up to 50% lower weights because of the wall thickness, and up to 50% reduction of external dimensions. And you have a smaller footprint. It also can be used for in installation of, for example, escape routes or something like that. Yeah, you have a well-arranged interior constructions. We have access to the customer industrial skid or mounting plate. Which we can in certain cases we can easily adapt into ExPressure. So that means that that it also can reduce the engineering time by R.Stahl and also by the customer.
So when people were asking what are the advantages of ExPressure over EXP, I will state that with EXP, you have to ensure that you have clean, dry, high quality air or nitrogen. That is not always possible in remote locations, dirty locations, high humidity locations. And when it does fail, you're looking at 5 volume changes. You could be looking at 30 minutes to an hour to restart that EXP cabinet. EXP is also, you're looking at problems with temperatures. When it overheats, that happens quite a bit. With heat, it's less of an issue with an EXD cabinet because it absorbs the heat equally throughout its entire enclosure. Now, somebody else was asking, what is the EXD enclosure and what is the relief? So the EXD is the overall enclosure. The EXS is the relief points on the side. So once again, the advantages are it's like a typical EXD box, but it's reduced weight, reduced dimensions, faster and easier to certify, to install, and everything. So it's still as flexible as a regular EXD box with added advantages. And you can add an EXE connection chamber. So ambient conditions, if I'll just cover this one really quickly. So construction, as we mentioned, it's the typical ones are 60079-1 EXD and -33 EXS. Now you do have the option for the connection chamber to -1, and it meets general requirements of -0. As Kirgily mentioned, this is an IECX and ATEX certified device. There are the certification numbers. We will share that in an email for you. So the typical installation, you can be looking at many different protection techniques because you can have barriers, intrinsically safe barriers inside. You can have optical devices inside. So this entire combination of what the cabinet is rated for can be anywhere from EXDB SB or EXDB EB. There's many different combinations. So when they say that it is flexible, it is a very flexible cabinet that can be used for nearly any consideration. As mentioned, it was IP66. We're looking at -40 to +60 because it's stainless steel, it's seawater resistant, H2S resistant. the painting process, you do not paint, cover, mask, or otherwise modify the rupture disc. And coating is not available, but it is also not necessary because it is stainless 316. Now, somebody asked a question. There is no purge requirement. How do you maintain the pressure without purging? This is not EXP. This is EXD. We're not maintaining pressure. We're not maintaining anything to do with purge. Okay. Go to the next one. Ursula, if you wanted to talk about the installation.
But about the installation, you can see the small picture just right out of our IOM sheet. You can have the explanation out of them. It's really detailed, described. To mount the enclosure to a wall, there are also already 2 enclosure, let me say, wall rails are welded to the enclosure. And if there is, if you installing outdoor and you have also sun operation under difficult conditions, it requires additional measures like a sunshade canopy, for example. You can also have a look on the rupture disc. This is also included in our IOM sheets with order numbers, how to replace them, under which number they must be ordered, and what the points have to be considered by maintenance.
So people were asking about the rupture disc. So yeah, another thing is maybe it's the blowout door. However anybody wants to understand it, it's what opens up to release the pressure. So where you have the mesh here, where I have highlighted, that's where the obviously the explosive pressure comes out. The rupture disc opens up, and the frame obviously holds that all together to the side of the EXD enclosure. So the EXS components are the mesh, the rupture disc, and that frame. That's how it differentiates from a typical EXD enclosure.
The rupture disc has two functions. It has nothing to do with EX, actually. It has 2 functions. It maintains the IP protection and signalize if there was an explosion. But the protection, the EX protection, is made by the mesh. And this is what prevent the hot surface and hot pressure and high pressure going outside from the inside of the cabinet through the mesh to the outside, to the EX atmosphere, that it has no temperature and no enough energy to ignite outside anything, any kind of EX atmosphere.
So to give people maybe another idea, is the mesh could be like the Davy lamp. So underground mining in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Perhaps if you go back to your general awareness training for EX, they used a mesh around a lamp to ensure that gases in coal mining would not ignite. So that's another idea, because that mesh will capture all arcs and sparks, and it will cool down any explosion. I think we're good on this one. Let me go to the next slide. But that's the basic construction. So a typical EXD box, just with these 3 added components on each side: the mesh, the rupture disc, and that frame. That's the EXS main components, but it's also tested and certified. So the maximum rated voltage, obviously, as you mentioned, was 11 kV, depending on the terminals. Maximum rated current, 1250, and maximum cross-sectional area was 300 millimeters squared. So it's a big enclosure that can handle high voltage, obviously 11 kV, and a very high current. So it's a very flexible design. Now, on the size of the enclosures, this is talking about the rupture discs clearance areas. So where you have to have, if you have a size 62, let's say enclosure, you have to have minimum clearance of 300 millimeters. So this is similar to flange type EXD boxes. You know, you have to have clearance of 10, 20, or 40 millimeters, depending on the type of gas group. Well, for their rupture disc, you just have to consider, this is in the certificate and their IOMs, installation, operation, and maintenance manuals. So it's just clearance on both sides of the cabinet, the enclosure. So we'll go to the next one. So it's important considerations when installing this, because if the rupture disc is restricted, you're not meeting the certificate, that is unsafe. It's obviously been tested specifically. So minimum distances between installed components, a distance of at least 30 millimeters between installed components and the mesh. So clearly you would say that it's because that mesh, it needs to have clear path for the gas or that explosion to actually directly, pointing directly at it, so that there's no pressure piling or restriction of that path, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's correct. And here is also the maximum cross-sectional area of, in the case of 2B, for example, of 80% must be also observed.
Okay.
So that the enclosure is not fully installed, yeah, and the mesh is not to be blocked.
Yep. So as typical EXD, we have specified torque ratings. So the use of a torque wrench obviously is required. This is a typical fault within hazardous areas where EPCs, end users, inspectors are not using a torque wrench. I would figure for a enclosure, that would be very important. If anybody's watched our webinar number 6, missing one bolt or loose bolts will then allow arcs and sparks and overpressure to escape the box at a pressure that it's not designed for. So same thing for the ExPressure enclosure. They need to be torqued as per the IOMs and the certificate. So obviously earthing and bonding, that's the most important electrical safety feature there is. Lightning protection, sparks, stopping line-to-line shorts, ground faults, any injuries to people. So it has that external earth. So it's typical, like a typical any EXD box. Now the maximum power loss in the table must not be exceeded. So once again, these are information that's found in the certificate of conformity, whether it be the IECX or ATEX, and under the IOMs, installation, operation, and maintenance manuals. So depending on the ambient temperature, your T rating of your enclosure will change, also dependent on the size and the overall wattage dissipation. So Gergely, if you wanted to,
this is a good. Actually, this is what we have mentioned already. That what did we meant reduce footprints thanks to ExPressure, and what used to be a 2 meter long XDE combination as on the left side, now it fits in a 1 meter ExPressure cabinet with a XE connection chamber. By combining components in different enclosures, you have extra work in the engineering, and also you have to make your thoughts going from one enclosure to the other, and the construction of the switchgear is more complicated. By using ExPressure, since we have almost the size of a normal industrial cabinet, the enclosure combinations are are installed in a single large volume control cabinet. As a result, you benefit in the engineering, the layout, setup, maintenance, and also inspection. And in the case of, or from the aspect of the total cost of ownership, the investment and the maintenance cost is much lower after a certain time. You have the break-even point much faster than in a conventional XD solution.
So when we look at the cabinet on the left, we're talking about 4 different EXD enclosures and then multiple EXE.
Yeah.
So if I was an installer, this installation is much more difficult. If we're talking about design, the design is much more difficult. And if we're talking about inspections, well, even more enclosures to open,
Yes.
possibly cause damage. It is a much more time cumbersome installation. While with the one over here, it's one EXD, B, SB enclosure, and perhaps an EB enclosure on the bottom. So some people are asking about
on the right side, what you,
some people are asking about overall cost. So if you were to compare the CAPEX and OPEX costs, what do you see the difference between a typical DE enclosure or E or D enclosure versus the ExPressure?
It's not easy to tell, because as I told, ExPressure is a premium solution. So if you compare the prices of the cabinet to the conventional XD solution, they cost more alone because of the material of the enclosure and the size of the enclosure. But you have only one cabinet, you have only one enclosure, you have less weight, you have you reduce your commissioning setup and maintenance time in the product life cycle. Yeah, from if we are talking about years, the cost of maintenance and repairs against to installation of the enclosure or the solution against to a conventional XD solution is cheaper for the owner than by conventional XD solutions. So you save time, you are saving personnel, you are saving also cost for using one single cabinet instead of a combination of many.
So to give input from a design, installation, operation, and maintenance perspective, I can see, yes, the material costs are higher, but the design, the EX design costs are lower. The time is shorter, so the cost is lower. Then when we look at installation, the installation of this cabinet on the right would be much quicker. So in countries such as Australia,
Yes.
UK, Canada, Australia, America, even other EU countries, the installation time is much less chance of mistakes. If we're talking about offshore,
exactly.
if we're talking about offshore, well, reduced weight is reduced costs. Reduced parts and components is reduced costs. They don't need to be flown or shipped offshore to a vessel. So, and then installation time and maintenance time and operational checks. Those manpower, the amount of hours saved can be in the hundreds of hours per year. On installation, I can see this being a 60% or more reduction in manpower. So in the long run, I would say within 2, 3, maybe 5 years, that easily offsets the greater material costs. And one thing we like to say is, you know, when things are easy to do, there's less chance of a fault to happen, less chance of a human-induced fault. Cabinets on the left, it's quite an intricate design. Engineers, installers, operators, and maintainers They probably don't understand that because that's going to require a lot of different documentation. Well, the ExPressure, well, 1 or 2 cabinets. That's about it. We'll go to the next one. So this is a example installation. That's correct, Kurgan?
Yes, this is the cabinet what you have seen on the previous slide. This is what we have installed inside the machine house behind the driver cabin on this crane by Liebherr on last year. And this also took a lot of discussions and finding solutions with the development department and engineering department, and also for the installation people by Liebherr to find a solution which can reduce space and weight in the crane itself. And then we can go to the next slide. Then you can see the example.
So just on this one, this is an offshore crane, is it?
Yeah, I think this was, yes, this was an offshore crane.
So with offshore cranes, obviously space is at a premium, weight is a very big consideration. So the space and the weight, big deal. And then as you see the routing of the cable, we're talking about it being outside underneath the crane. So if we were talking about even more cables for use, that puts the installers in even more danger. And if there's any maintenance requirements in the future, it's difficult. As the crane, obviously, you would require a lot of scaffolding. Now,
this is
so next slide.
Yeah, this was the previous solution from us. If you can see that this was 2 different enclosure combination in XDE combination, with one with 900 and one with 800 kilograms, and we did a new engineering together with the customer, and now we were successful to place everything inside of one our big ExPressure cabinet size 62 with connection chamber under it, and thus we achieved the footprint saving of 45% and weight reduction by 42%. And
so the weight
they have much more space in the control cabinet of the crane, yeah, and there are more space also for other installation from the customer, and also better routes for the drivers itself.
So the overall weight went from 1,700 kilograms between those 2 enclosures down to 1,000 overall. So a significant space and weight savings. And being offshore, I can tell you, we always have continuous maintenance, tripping, issues always happening. The more easy the installation is to work with, open, do maintenance on, the less downtime. So the more time producing product, oil, gas, the greater. So a simplified solution is obviously a much better solution, an advantageous solution for end users and EPCs. Now, we had somebody asking.
And this is. Yeah.
We had somebody asking.
Just one more.
Go ahead.
Just one more point. This is also what I told, and also you told, Michael, that the overall costs. Yeah, the solution is a premium solution, but if you can, for example, in this case from the crane, if you can reduce the machine house, the size of the machine house, or you can use a smaller dome under the crane, or you can place the solution under the dome or in the dome under the crane, and you can save the complete machine house behind the driver, for example. You have more space on your ship or on your platform, and you have more free crate to move the crane itself. So It's all these points which must be considered, and that's why it's important that we are talking with each other, because only to compare solutions with solutions and prices with prices, it's not always the best way.
So looking at this, I can definitely say that it's a higher quality solution, but it's also a safer solution. And the reason is the less chance for human-induced faults. Once this cabinet is placed in the correct location with the correct spacing from the rupture disc, from the sides, the less chance that there is low chance for a human-induced fault. If we have the obviously you would want to have the hinge door type, but the EXD flame paths are reduced compared to the other ones, where you had 4 different boxes. The more you open something, the more chance you have to induce a fault, to drop it, to scratch a flame path. This one only has 1 door. The other one had 4. There's much more greater chance of the other one being modified, of a fault being induced, or confusion. This, you open up the doors and you look inside one enclosure. Okay, let's.
If you go one slide further, yeah.
Sure. Also, somebody was asking, can an empty enclosure be sold?
Yes, but what we are thinking of solutions together, because this is always the question: are you certified to make an assembly? Because what are you doing with an empty enclosure? This solution, what you are seeing now on the slide, is a complete certified and engineered solution from us, from R.Stahl, and this is certified as an assembly with our rating plate. If you are buying an empty enclosure, you have an empty enclosure, but you are not allowed to install anything inside of the cabinet. You have to go to a certified body and test laboratory to certify it as an assembly, and you are the manufacturer then for this combination.
So if a manufacturer was wanting to,
I don't think that the cost for
so if a manufacturer was wanting to produce a customized solution, it's highly recommended that they work with Stahl. But if it's a unique solution that perhaps Stahl does not cover, it's still a very good idea to work with Stahl because they designed this EXDB SB enclosure. But like any standard EXD enclosure, you can put whatever you want into it if it is then tested and certified by an EXTL and EXCB, a certified body and also a notified body. So to use this solution, it's a good idea to work with Stahl on it. But yes, it can be sourced. I do believe I've seen it for sale from Stahl, but you must go through the same process of you must have it tested and certified. You can't just buy the empty enclosure and do whatever you wish.
You have to do a power loss calculation for the installed components. You have to maintain the maximum installed power loss. You have to maintain, because inside of the cabinet, it's industry. You have to follow the industrial standards, the low voltage directly for wiring, maximum ampacity of wires, the pathing of power circuits or control circuits, maintenance distance between IS and non-IS circuits, and so on and so on. So this is not that easy, and this is why we always recommend to come to us if you need a solution, and we can help you. We can surely help you.
Now, one solution that I saw that was very unique when working with this piece of equipment is this equipment on racks. Now, a typical EXD installation, you won't find racked equipment that can slide out to work on. As we have here, we have circuit breakers and what looks to be PLCs, where everything is on slidable racks.
This is the cabinet we have installed on the crane. And this was together with the engineer and development department from Liebherr, and also on the maintenance department. If you can go to the left top side, Michael, this is the pull out rack of the automation system of the hydraulic. But this pull out system we have developed together to save place inside the enclosure. Left middle part is the controller of the automation, and the left bottom side you can see star delta motor controller or motor starters for 2 motors of each 270 kVA for driving the crane. The right top is more or less a distribution board and interconnection for the valve control. And the right bottom you can see the main switches.
So as an installer maintainer,
As
an installer maintainer, I would say that this is very advantageous. The ability to bring the work out to you into the light, no dark spaces, easier to fault find, to trace down individual circuits. I would find this to be very beneficial over a cabinet which would have 6, 7, 8 different enclosures where you would have to track things down with documentation. So I would very much enjoy this, and it would reduce maintenance.
And we have made a heat run test in our laboratory on the crane. We have tested also in real conditions with real load on the crane, and stated together with the customer the rated diversity factor, for example. That's what have made us possible to install everything inside one cabinet.
Now, to mention an industry trend where we have come across, I've seen many times, is manufacturers will buy an empty enclosure and throw whatever they want into it, and then sell that enclosure, install that enclosure, and we inspectors in the field are stuck with this. And then the end user and the EPC are taken advantage of. Now, if you see anything with a U certificate on an enclosure, that means that enclosure was sold from the likes of, let's say, R.Stahl to another manufacturer. That other manufacturer, it is their responsibility. They are legally responsible to whatever they put in there. They must then have it tested and certified. So be aware of that. So same thing for this. You can buy it with a U certificate, but you can't just then sell your installation without further testing and certification. So it is highly recommended you speak to the experts at R.Stahl or get into contact with us at Index or anybody else, whoever you may wish. But it is highly important to not just buy an empty enclosure and do whatever you wish with it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So installation and maintenance requirements, we've gone over that, but it's also found within the IECX certificate. So as we mentioned before, IECX PTB 170039X. X, conditions of use. So you have to follow in that order. Follow what the certificate says, the manufacturer's installation, operation, and maintenance manuals. So that means the technical documentation, the data sheets, the installation requirements. So this is a certified piece of kit for IECX and ATEX. All that must be followed is clearly defined. Remember, you don't do as the standards tell you. You do first what the certificate tells you, then the manufacturer tells you, then the standards. So if you do not understand EXS, the most important thing to do is do what the certificate and R.Stahl tells you for this product. Do not go to EXS and figure out what you must do. Do as the certificate and the IOMs tell you. Go to the next one. So these important considerations are covered by R.Stahl. You do not clean the mesh. You do not wipe down the mesh. It is something that must not be touched. The covers, typical EXD cover, take it off properly, bolt it up, torque it correctly. Do not damage the flame path. Do not damage the rupture plate, the mesh. Do not spray direct water jets at the rupture disc or at the mesh. So all these requirements are clearly listed. So how to open it, how to maintain it, how to clean it. Don't go putting Denso tape over the rupture disc. So inspections, now for myself, this is really important. This is what interests me, because when we come across this product in the field, when people haven't seen these type of products before, they may figure it's just a typical EXD, so they may introduce faults. But specifically, the vent needs to be visually, optically inspected on a regular basis. So we're probably talking about 6 months, every year. Look for damages. See if the vent's blown out. That's the visual indication. And as Gurley mentioned, that rupture disc can be replaced. During this replacement, the grid plate shall be inspected for soiling. So you're looking for dirt, you're looking for water ingress. The permeability of that mesh, the ability for it to function, is the importance of EXS, that special type of protection. Anything that can reduce this permeability for the pressure release is important to the integrity. Okay, so any repairs of flame-proof joints, of pressure relief, or for drilling of new entries, let's say, must be done by the manufacturer, Stahl, or an unapproved IECX service facility. I would still speak to the manufacturer, and if you can't get it back to Stahl, ask them for who they approve, which IECX service facility, which you can find on the IECX website. So you must comply with the certificates, with the IOMs, and the standards, and any national deviations. So replacing of that rupture disc, once again, selecting and mounting only after consulting with R.Stahl. Before installing a new rupture disc, make sure that grid, that mesh, is clean. Speak to R.Stahl how to clean it. Don't just use any type of cleaning fluid or method. So if you need more information, Gurley, I believe that would be one of your emails, and you can be contacted directly.
This is the integrated.solutions@r-stahl.com. This is the email address of our team, our business development team. And if I'm not there, I'm not in the office, then one of my colleagues will definitely contact you if you need some more information or help, or if you would like to talk about the solution.
Okay, so we'd like to thank everybody for attending. If you have any questions, we'll go back to here. We are now open for questions on anything to do with these cabinets. And if people were asking about EXP, EXD, empty enclosures, so we did answer a few of those throughout the presentation. Apologies for it running longer, but it is a different version of EX protection that most have not come across. So I'll open up to questions now, and yeah, quite a few questions throughout the presentation. So to go over the EXP again, obviously remote installations such as remote platforms, a lot of time there is not instrument air. So here's an example solution. There's also the visual indication whenever there is an explosion. A typical EXD box, the only way you're going to see if there has been explosions is if you are doing your inspections and maintenance and you have opened up the enclosure. There are many companies, let's just say, that where, such as during times of COVID, the reduction in inspections and maintenance have been done as a cost-saving measure. So how do you visually inspect an EXD box? Unless you have an inspection window, you perhaps will not be seeing the damage that has happened inside. With this type of installation, anybody walking by can see the rupture disc has blown out. So it's a great visual indication. So it actually is reducing your inspection costs, because during a visual inspection, you can see that an explosion has happened. So that perhaps can give you indication things are overheating, things are arcing and sparking.
And there is also the possibility to give a signal, an electrical signal, if the rupture disc has opened.
So like
this is also
EXP
an
panel,
possible option.
Yeah. So like an EXP panel, if you lose pressurization, you can have a signal back to your central control room. Same thing can happen for this cabinet. That option is there, so your operators would know instantaneously if there is a problem. Now, a typical EXD enclosure, if there's an explosion inside, but nothing turns off, you do not have instantaneous awareness of that happening. So with EXP and ExPressure, you can have that option.
And this is only one possible application. We can also, if you were talking about unmanned platform, we also have solutions for UPS or off-grid. This is also can be made by or with ExPressure.
I also see the advantages of since it can go to 11 kV switchgear, fuses. The likes of these can be located directly in this, directly next to the piece of equipment. So there's less requirements of cables. So you're cabling all the way back to a pressurized room on a vessel, on an FPSO. That is not needed. You now have the option of mounting your control gear directly adjacent to the motor, to the transformer. So there's much more flexibility for installation and design. Okay, so I think we answered the questions of EXS to people. So once again, people, EXS is a standard that allows for different ideas. Yeah. We will do another webinar index on EXS. It's a standard that is based on investigations, gap analysis, design analysis. It's not an easy to understand one, but this has been independently tested and certified by PTB from Germany and has been proven safe. This is a premium option that can be used in many locations. Stainless steel, IP66, EXDB, SB, 2B, and can be anywhere from T3 to, I believe, T5, maybe even T6, depending on what is installed. So it has a wide flexibility range to do many things. So I think we answered a lot of people's questions, such as costs, the difference between EXD and S, also if it can be sold separately. Okay, Gergely, did you have anything that you would like to mention or any further considerations?
No, we were talking about a lot of points, a lot of application, a lot of interesting stuff, the advantages, the effort of ExPressure. The webinar will be available on YouTube, I think, Mike?
Correct. We will make the presentation available on Index's website, sorry, on our YouTube page. We will insert the R.Stahl promotional videos about ExPressure. We understand that EXS is the big question for a lot of people. It is safe. It has been independently tested and certified. So this was to give awareness of this solution.
From my side, please let free yourself to take any questions about.
So if anybody has any questions, we'll show again the email address for integrated.solutions@rstahl.com. Feel free to also contact us at Index. We will answer any installation operations, maintenance questions. We do have experience with this product, and we can give perhaps a third-party view on things. And we will go into EXS on a webinar. So this is an interesting solution within the field that we wanted to expand on, since we did mention it in webinar number 6, and we wanted to explain it to people. So I would like to thank Gergely. Did you have any last inputs or any last questions from anybody? If not, we would like to thank everybody for attending.
During that, I would also like to thank for your attention, and I wish you a good Monday and a good week, and we will contact.
Thank you everybody for attending. Us at Index and also Gergely from R.Stahl, we really do appreciate your time. If you have any further questions, please do contact us, and we will be sending out an email with the link for the YouTube video. And if you have any further questions, please do not be shy to ask. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.